Welcome to the video. Thanks for joining me here today. We're going to dip our toe into the wonderful world of fractions, decimals and percentages in this particular video. We're going to be taking a look at what they actually are, and we're also going to be answering the question of how do we change fractions to decimals to percentages and all the way back again. So grab your favourite beverage, grab something to write with, something to write on, and come along and join us. You're going to enjoy this one. And here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to dive on into today's content, and we can see our objectives are on the board. We need to be able to understand what fractions, decimals, and percentages actually are. We also need to be able to rewrite fractions as decimals or percentages, and of course, all the way back again. So we're going to take a little look at what fractions, decimals, and percentages actually are. These are all smaller parts of a whole value. Okay, so they're almost the same thing, they're just presented in a different way. We'll explore that notion as we go through the session. Now, we need to be able to convert between the three different formats, fractions, decimals and percentages, because it will become very, very handy when it comes to the exams. For example, you may be asked to find 1/4 of something, maybe asked to find, for example, a percentage of something, or even a decimal of something, a decimal amount of something, okay? And we can see down here one or two examples, okay, of that going on right there. So we're going to begin by finding how to write a fraction as a decimal. This is really quite straightforward. All we need to do is remember to divide the top number by the bottom number. Now, as always with mathematics, okay, this is littered with various bits of vocabulary that we need to be familiar with. Wherever we see the word numerator, it just refers to the top of the fraction, and denominator just refers to the value at the bottom of the fraction. So remember, fraction to a decimal, we just divide the top by the bottom. We've got some examples for us to work through. Question 1, write 1/2 as a decimal. So remember, it's the top divided by the bottom, and it's going to give me our 0.5. Change 3/4 into a decimal. Okay, so remember, write, change, express, it's all the same question. So we follow the same procedure. The top divided by the bottom, this is going to give me 0.75. And lastly, express 28/49 as a decimal. And for that one, I'm going to defer to my calculator for a moment because these questions can appear both in calculator papers and non-calculator papers. Interesting point at this conjecture, and that is this. If you are an IGCSE student, okay, you have 2 exam papers, not 3, 2, and both of those are calculator papers. Okay, so that means if you're doing the IGCSE syllabus, you will have a calculator for everything, okay, every question, unlike the GCSE syllabus. So on the calculator, a scientific calculator, you will see a fractions button. Casios tend to have them all in the same place, regardless of the model, and that's in the first column, the third button down, which is just here. So I'm going to use this button here, and I'm going to type 28 as my numerator, or my top value. Use these navigation keys here to go down, type in the 49. Now this is really important. See the right hand arrow, step away now from that fraction, press equals. Now the first thing it's going to do is simplify that fraction for me, which should be 4/7, I guess. And if I press the SD button, it will convert it to a decimal, which is just here. Okay, so we've got 28 divided by 49 is equal to 0.571428. That is supposed to be a 5 there. So that's how we convert a fraction to a decimal. there's another thing to note. Our calculator display had a dot above the 5 and a dot above the 8. Let's remind ourselves. Hopefully you can see it just above the 5 and just above the 8. What this indicates is this group of 6 numbers, 5, 7, 1, 4, 2, 8, is going to be repeated consistently for an infinite amount of time. Okay, so the answer will be 0.571428, 571428, 571428, etc., going on forever. So since it's not practical to continue to write the same numbers over and over again, we denote this pattern as being what we call recurring, with a dot above the first number in the pattern or sequence and a dot above the last. The next thing we're going to take a look at is how to write a decimal as a percentage. Okay, this is really simple. It's probably one of the most simple parts of this session. All we have to do is multiply by 100. So for example, 0.56 times by 100 becomes 56%. Okay, now, if you're not quite sure how to do that multiplication, remember that we times by 100, there are 2 zeros. This means we're moving the decimal place 2 spaces to the right. Okay, if I was timesing by 10, it's 1 0, I'd move it 1 place. If I was timesing by 1,000, for example, there are 3 zeros, I would move it 3 places. Okay, so just look at the number of zeros. That's how many places or columns you need to move the decimal point. 0.06 into a percentage, 0.06 times by 100. Okay, now again, remember there are 2 zeros. Move the decimal point once, twice, it's just after the 6. So it's just 6%. 5/8 as a percentage. Okay, so this is not changing a decimal to a percentage. This is changing a fraction into a percentage. Okay, but that's fine because we already know how to turn a fraction into a decimal, right? It's top divided by bottom. So this will give me a decimal. And after I've turned it into a decimal, remember I times it by 100. Remember, when we times by 100, we move the decimal point 2 spaces to the right. So again, you can use your calculator for this if you've got one, but hopefully you have. 5/8. My calculator equals 0.625. Okay, now remember we're going to times this by 100 to turn it into a decimal. Okay, so to turn it into a decimal, we're moving, or to times by 100, we're moving once, twice, because with 2 zeros. And this puts the decimal point between the 2 and the 5. So I've got 62.5%. I hope that makes sense. So we're now going to do the opposite thing. We're going to take a percentage, we're going to turn it into a decimal. Now, earlier, when we turned decimals into percentages, we multiplied by 100. Now remember, we're going the opposite direction. We already have a percentage, we're turning it into a decimal this time. So the opposite of times by 100 is, of course, divide by 100. We take the 12%, we divide it by 100. Now, when we did this earlier, what we did was we looked at how many zeros we were dividing by or timesing by, but there were 2 of them. So we moved the decimal point 2 places. Now, since our decimal point is already at the end of the 12, because this is the same as 12.00, for example, okay, what this means is we are going to move the decimal point, but we're going to move it in the opposite direction here, 1, 2. So the decimal point is going to be after the 1. So my answer will be, or before the 1, sorry, 0 point and then the 1 and the 2, 0.12. Again, you can put this straight into your calculator, right, like so. 12 over 100 equals, and of course it will simplify it, so you just press the SD button, it'll turn it into a decimal. Of course, if you want to go back the other way, press the SD button again, it'll convert it backwards and forwards. But 0.12 is the answer that we are looking for here. 7% as a decimal. Okay, so here we go. 7 divided by 100. Now remember, 7 on its own is the same as 7.0 or 00, however many zeros you want to consider or think about. We are dividing by 100, which tells me I need to move the decimal point, okay, 2 spaces to the left, because when we are dividing, we go to the left. So this is going to go 1, 2. So I'm going to put a 0 here because it's going to go after the, before the 7, before the 0. So this is going to give me 0.07 because the decimal point would be here. Again, you can check this on a calculator, but bear in mind, it depends on what syllabus you are following, okay, what exam system you are enrolled in, as to whether you will be able to use a calculator or not. So just bear that in mind. Being able to divide by 10, 100, 1000, if you do not have a calculator, is a critical skill for you to learn and remember. 13.2 over 100. So again, this is the same as when we start out with this. This is the same as moving the decimal point from its position here after the 3 and before the 2, okay, to the left once, twice, because there are 2 zeros in the 100, okay, which means the decimal point will be in this position here in front of the 1. So we have our 3 and our 2, and of course we're going to put a 0 in front of that as well. 0.132 is our final answer. As always, you can put that straight into your calculator, okay, if you are able to do so. 13.2 over 100, it gives me 0.132. It's now time to look at how to write a decimal as a fraction in its simplest form. So to do this, we take the digits from the decimal, we write them over 100, and then we simplify. There is a caveat to that, and we can see that in the third and final example here. Now, before we get started, please note that these questions are all written ever so slightly differently. We've been asked to write 0.65 as a fraction. We've been asked to change 0.28 into a fraction and express 0.468 as a fraction. Okay, it's all the same question. Okay, we do it in exactly the same way for each, or a similar way for each at least. We're going to start off by taking the 65 from 0.65. We're going to write it over 100. Since this is exactly the same as this, they're an identical value, they're just written in a slightly different way. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to simplify. There's a couple of different ways we can simplify this, but do remember that when you are simplifying a fraction, we are dividing the numerator, that's the top number, and the denominator, that's the bottom number, by their highest common factor. So let's just remind ourselves of how to do this. Now, we did this in the very first video in this series. So if you're not quite sure how to do this, you may want to go back and just double check, just to refresh your memory. But here we go. I'm going to start off with the 65. Okay, I'll divide by 1 to begin with. 65 divided by 1 will give me 65. It will not divide by 2, 3, 4, but it will divide by 5, giving me 13. Now, I can continue and look at dividing 65 by 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12, but I do know that 65 will not divide by any of those numbers, so I have all the factors of 65. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at the factors of 100. I know 100 will divide by 1 and it will give me 100. I know it will divide by 2, giving me 50. I know it will divide I know it will not divide by 3. It will not divide by, or rather, it will divide by 4. Give me 25. I know it will divide by 5. Give me 20. I know it will not divide by 6, 7, 8, or 9, but will divide by 10, giving me 10 at the end. They are all the factors of 100. Now, again, I do urge you to go back and revisit the highest common factor, lowest common multiple video if you're a bit unsure about that particular skill. 5 is the highest number that appears in both lists. Therefore, 5 is the highest common factor. What does that mean? It means it's the biggest number that 65 and 100 will divide by. 65 divided by 5 is going to give me 13. 100 divided by 5 is going to give me 20. So we've concluded that particular question. Our final answer is going to be 65 over 100. Let's take a look at the second example. Change 0.28 into a fraction in its simplest form. I'm going to take the 28 from the 0.28, going to write it over 100. Now please do remember this has exactly the same value as this. They are the exact same thing as each other. We've just written it in a different form. So we have turned it into a fraction, but remember, we have to give our answer in its simplest form. So if you are not yet comfortable finding the highest common factor of the numerator, that's the top number, and the denominator, that's the bottom number, then don't panic. Because what we can do is take a slightly different approach to this. We can divide 28 and 100 by 2 because they're both even numbers. Okay, so 28 divided by 2 is 14. 100 divided by 2 is 50. We look at the two numbers, 14 and 50, and ask ourselves, can I divide again? And the answer is yes, because they are both even numbers. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 50 divided by 2 is 25. Neither one of them will divide any further. So therefore, we are finished. Final answer. Looking at our third and final example, I have the number 4, 6, 8. I cannot write this over 100. What I do is we look at how many digits we've got after the decimal, which is 3. That's how many zeros I need to include at the bottom. So I have to write it over 1000. So for example, if I had 0.7, I would write the 7 over 10 because there's one digit, 1 0. 0.9967. 4 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4. I hope that is kind of giving you the right idea of as to why we have written it over 1000 and not 100. Okay, so let's now simplify this. Again, we can find the highest common factor of 468 and 1000, or we can do this in small steps. Now, since most of you are here because you need the extra practice, etc., you can press pause and find that highest common factor for yourself now. Or you can let the video play and we're going to go through this in the small steps that we demonstrated in the second example. Okay, let's take a look. Now, 468 is even, 1000 is even. That means they will both divide by 2. 468 divided by 2 is going to be 234. 1000 divided by 2 is 500. Again, we have even numbers, so we can divide by 2 yet again. 234 is going to be 117 divided by 2. 500 divided by 2 is 250. Okay, so that appears to be about as far as we can go with this one. Okay, and we can, of course, use your calculator to help you with this as well, folks. If you are in a calculator-based exam, or if you're in IGCSE exams, which are all calculators. Okay, and we can see that I've already typed this one in there. 468 over 1000. Your calculator will simplify this fraction for you. All right, so if you're in a calculator exam, please do get familiar with using that fractions button. It's going to be quite a helpful piece of knowledge to walk into the exam with. Let's take a look at how we write a percentage as a fraction in its simplest form. To do this, we take the percentage, and much like we did with the decimal, we write it over 100 and then we simplify. So to turn 14% into a fraction in its simplest form, we take the 14, write it over 100, and then we can simplify. Now we can find the highest common factor of 14 and 100, like so. 14 will divide by 1, give me 14. It will divide by 2, giving me 7. That's about all that 14 will divide by. 100 will divide by 1, give me 100. It will divide by 2, give me 50. It will divide by 4, give me 25. It will divide by 5, give me 20. It will divide by 10, give me 10. So the highest common factor between 14 and 100 is going to be 2. This means we can go ahead, we can divide the top by 2, we can divide the bottom by 2. And when we do that, we end up with 7 over 50. That's our final answer. Let's take a look at the second example question. Change 8% into a fraction in its simplest form. We take the 8, we write it over 100, okay, and then we can simplify from there. Now, the highest common factor between 8 and 100 is 4. But if you can't identify it as 4, please don't worry. Remember, you can do this in small stages. So 8 and 100 are both even, so we can divide by 2 to begin with at the top and the bottom. Now, please do remember that once you've started the process, what you do to the top, you must do to the bottom, right? So 8 divided by 2 is 4, 100 divided by 2 is 50. Again, we've got even numbers in the 4 and the 50. So these will again divide by 2 at the top and the bottom, remember. Okay, and this will give me 4 divided by 2 is 2. 50 divided by 2 is 25. And that is as far as we can go. Take a look at the very next one, 24.2% as a fraction in its simplest form. So I'm going to take the 24.2, we're going to write it over 100. Now, it's really unusual to see a decimal in a fraction. So we are going to change this ever so slightly. Now, remember what we said before. I've got 3 digits involved here. I'm going to have 3 zeros involved too. So I would write this as 242 over 1000. Okay. So again, if you do not know the highest common factor between 242 and 1000, you can simply do this in smaller steps. Since they're both even, they will both divide by 2. (242) divided by 2 is going to give me 121. 1000 divided by 2 is going to give me 500. And that's about as far as we can go. We cannot really proceed any further. As I've already said before, you can just put these into your calculator, okay? And your calculator will do all the heavy lifting for you. I've already put the third one into the calculator to demonstrate this, which looks like this. So 24.2 over 100 is going to simplify straight away to 121 over 500. Okay, so again, if you are in a calculator based exam, please do make use of that fractions button on your calculator. It's really, really important that you know how to use it and when to use it. We have reached the point in this session where you get to put these skills to the test now. So please do grab a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper or a notebook and have a little go at these. Remember to press pause, give yourself as much time as you need, and feel free to use a calculator. Press pause now. Well, hopefully you've given yourself enough time now to work your way through some of these questions, and if not, please again press pause and give yourself a little bit more time. Okay, let's just take a look at some of these answers then. Express 15% as a decimal. Now remember, to turn a percentage into a decimal, we divide by 100. So 15 divided by 100. Now, I'm hoping you have realized by now that this is exactly the same as writing 15 divided by 100. Okay, look at the divide sign, guys. It's a line with something above and something below. A line with something above, something below. Something above, something below. Okay, this means fraction, and fraction means divide. So hopefully you've made that link and you're able to utilize that in future problem solving. Remember, when we are dividing by 100, we simply move the decimal 2 spaces to the left, okay, because there are 2 zeros that we are dividing by here. So 15, 2 spaces left once. Twice means it's going to be in front of the 1 and the 5. Of course, we put the 0 here as a bit of a space holder to show it's 0.15. Let's just take a look at the next one. Right, 0.76 as a percentage. Okay, so this is the exact opposite. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the 0.76, okay, and we are going to times by 100. So the opposite is going to happen now. We're going to move the decimal in the opposite direction once, twice. So it's after the 6. After the 6. So we will have the 7 and the 6 and then the decimal. Now 76.0 is exactly the same as 76. So we tend to write just 76 and of course include the percentage sign as well. So this brings us to question 3. Write 3/8 as a percentage. So don't forget that when we see a fraction, it simply means the top divided by the bottom. This is going to be 0.375. To turn that decimal into a percentage, all we need to do is multiply by 100. And remember, as we do that, okay, the decimal point is going to shift 2 spaces to the right. As I say spaces, I mean 2 place value columns, 1, 2. So the decimal point should appear between the 7 and the 5. This will give me 37.5%. Taking a look at question 4 now. Question 4 is trickier than it first might seem. We're going to take a look at this fraction. we're going to simplify it. We're going to write it in its smallest possible terms. This is going to be an easier way to deal with this problem. Okay, now to do that, I'm going to divide the top by 15, the bottom by 15, and I will be given 1 over 5. 1 over 5, or 1/5, is one of those fractions you do need to memorize as a decimal and a percentage. 1 over 5 is 0.20. Okay, you can check that in your calculator if you wish. Okay, and of course, if you were asked to write that as a percentage, it would be 20%. So let me know down in the Q&A, or down in the chat, I should say, how many questions did you get correct? And which question did you find particularly difficult or challenging? And don't forget to ask for any help down in the comment section also. It would seem prudent to finish this session off with a summary of what we've spoken about. We've discussed how to change fractions to decimals and to percentages and all the way back again. And we can see we have somewhat of a flowchart here to help demonstrate what we did. To turn a fraction into a decimal this way, okay, we simply took the top, divided it by the bottom. Now remember, the top number is referred to as a numerator, the bottom a denominator. To take a decimal and turn it into a percentage, yeah, this direction, we simply multiply by 100. So that means we have enough information to take a fraction and turn it into a percentage. All you do is turn it into a decimal to begin with, so top divided by bottom, and then times by 100 to get your percentage. Going in the opposite direction means doing the opposite thing. So percentages into decimals means we divide by 100 instead of timesing by 100. To go from a decimal to a fraction, okay, well, this is slightly different because we're going to write over 100 and then simplify. Okay. Hopefully you have enough information there now to help you understand this particular part of the topic in your maths lessons in your school. If you've got any questions, please do post them down below in the comments area, and I'll be glad to get back to you when I'm able to. You can also, remember, post your score. How did you do out of the 4 or 5 questions we posted earlier? Did you get them all correct? Were you happy with your answers? Let me know. In the meantime, guys, thank you very much for watching this video. I do truly appreciate it. If you want to continue supporting the channel, please do remember that you can buy me a coffee should you choose to do so, or make a donation towards the channel by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link at least. And that will help to keep the channel going and growing, and hopefully it's going to help you in your journey towards success in your maths exams. I'll see you in the next one.